Hi, this is Steve, and here are some more of my gaming vexes. So thanks everybody for volunteering. I don't know, throwing your oar into this conversation. Essentially, this just came out of me thinking about how much time I spend doing this stuff, this role-playing game stuff. And I just thought, why? Why do we do it? You know, not some highfalutin to think about why RPGs, you know, storytelling, blah, 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 blah. But why do individually we spend so much time
and money as well.
Time, money, effort. Let's call it opportunity cost in the spirit of making a management consultancy type thing. What we'll do, we'll make a start. So we'll go around the virtual room and then people can introduce themselves. If you've got a social media tag, feel free to share it. No one cares, but you can anyway. That's fine.
My name's Andrew. I've been role-playing for over 40 years. You can find me on most social media under the tag Zos93.
John Murty, been gaming for about 20 years. So I'm the youngster of the group, I think. You find me on social media under K Shadow with a K.
Evening all, Jim Hawkins. I've been playing since 1982 with not much of a deep freeze. In fact, nearly no deep freeze on this. So that's me. Oh, and I'm not on social media because I'm that guy.
Hiya, I'm Chris, also known as Dirt the Dice from the Grognard Files podcast. And I was in a deep freeze for a long time. And I'm only just thawing out.
I'm Neil Benson. Go by on Blue Sky, it's Old Scouse RP, and on Twitter, I think it's Old Scouser RPing, something like that. Anyway, it's one of those. Like pretty much everyone here started back in the early 80s, so 40 years, but a substantial deep freeze of maybe 20 years. When I think about it now, I can't imagine what my life was like in those dark days.
It's my chance to shine.
Dave Patterson. Boy genius. Likewise, started early 80s, long deep freeze, much like Neil, spent some time as a nanny raising children, but have jumped back in with both feet.
Hello all, yeah, Gianni, looking at the videos, I guess we're all on the same boat, 50 something. So
except for John.
Yeah, I had a gaming freeze also in the 90s, early noughties, and then came back to the hobby.
I don't think we've heard from Graham yet either.
Gaming since about, I can't remember if it was 79 or 80, but it was quite early, basic D&D. Never really had the gaming freeze. I always joke the Spinal Tap joke about warm water, maybe a year or so where I didn't get any gaming in, but generally always tried to keep gaming and always kept an eye on what was going on in the hobby.
So, as I say, really it's just a bit of a chat about, what we as individuals get out of this and why we do it, really. So, just to kick things off, I mean, from my perspective, I did have a deep freeze like a lot of people, but I always gamed, and I did a lot of miniature gaming, miniature war gaming, did a lot of actually quite competitive war gaming. And so one of the things I loved about that was the rules. I really enjoyed sort of, trying new rule sets, seeing how it works, seeing some of the nuances and that sort of thing. But what I didn't really get on with wargaming was the really competitive side. It was almost like a zero-sum game, in as much as, if you're playing a competitive wargame, usually it's about 3 hours, and in the first half an hour that you're going to lose. So you spend 2.5 hours losing slowly, and that's no fun at all. And although there's a bit of, collaborative element to it, in as much as you've got a shared world, whether it be like a fantasy sci-fi game or whatever it might be, essentially someone comes out of it feeling a bit sad, really, because someone's come out of it having lost the game. So casting around, the reason I got back into tabletop role-playing was because it scratched a lot of those itches. So I really like rules, although I can be a little bit expansive and variable in terms of how I implement them, but I enjoy reading different rule sets. So, for example, every game I try to run, I try and take something from it. So for example, Savage Worlds, didn't get on with that at all. But what I did like was quick encounters. And so expect to see quick encounters come into the One Ring game from you. And I like clocks out of Blades in the Dark. So what I tend to do is take different aspects and elements of rules and sort of jam them into a game that I like. A bit like, there's a podcast there where you take different elements of different games and put them together into one. I think I've paid to do it right now.
Sounds rubbish. It sounds rubbish.
Never heard of it.
Who would do that ridiculous thing? Anyway, so rules, really. So that's what I like about tabletop gaming. I also really like the lonely full element. So with war games, a lot of it was painting the miniatures and making the scenery and that sort of thing. In tabletop role playing, because most of mine is on Foundry, I just love farting around with Foundry or not Roll20, because Roll20 is crap, but I like around with, and I like making them look pretty and having little overlays and all that. Chris is pulling faces, but I enjoy that stuff. For me, that's what I enjoy doing, is setting the game up. And then a final.
Have you gone into deep then on Foundry, doing like the flashy landing pages that you see on YouTube all the time now?
No.
You got into that yet?
No. I'm not that flashy.
Don't give them ideas.
I'm medium. I am trying to work out how to get a Klingon teleporter special effect on the tabletop, but I haven't quite got there yet. But I was thinking about that today. Anyway,
that'd be amazing.
That'd be amazing. So there you go. Let's do it.
You are bad.
Exactly. But let's say yes and rather than yes but. So bringing it together in tabletop roleplay is that collaborative element. I think, when you play a game together, essentially everybody wins, and it brings in the rules and how rules look with setting, or just interesting little, how mechanisms, how they work. It links with the Foundry tabletop, or, I prefer the Foundry tabletop to the face-to-face preparation, because that's just, let's face it, laminating stuff. And then it's, I say, getting together and essentially everybody pulling in the same direction. So, I rarely get to the end of a game. I would almost say almost never get to the end of the game and think, I lost, the players won. Even when the Hobbit does kill the dragon unexpectedly, then we've all won. That phrases it on to that point. Okay, so that's me. That's where I'm coming from with it. So I'm just going to throw it open. Who wants to jump in? What do you as an individual get out of a role-playing game? Why this? Why not post-collect?
I'll bite.
Go on then. Go on, Neil.
I'll lay my cards out on the table for other people to laugh at. And
TPK, that's what
so,
it plays.
So TPK, that's it. No. So you said to think about three things that you get from an RPG. So I was thinking about, like, to me, there's like a particular type of excitement that I get from an RPG that I don't get from anything else. And it goes back to when I think I was 16, and I've talked about this before. I'd seen Bakshi's Lord of the Rings, blew my mind. I started reading a bit of fantasy, and I just started discovering, started with Tunnels and Trolls, D&D, going into Games of Liverpool, all the games, it was just like Aladdin's cave for or of the imagination. And there was just a real excitement to it. And there's a lot of stumbles and missteps along the way. But I think, it doesn't always happen, but it often does, that you kind of get that same feeling, that buzz. So that's a big part of it for me.
So can I ask you then, Neil, so what gives you that buzz then? What is it? What
yeah.
You think about one thing that gives you that.
I don't think it is one thing. I think it's a combination of things. So I think the game, you talk about the rules, and I think the game is really important. And, I'm not having any of this story nonsense or whatever, it's just a game that we play. But it's the way it comes together. And I think a lot of it is being able to interact with something that feels really interesting, and not in a competitive way, So I think, I don't know. I mean, that's a really good question.
That's what we're trying to get to. I'm not expecting we'd come to great revelations on this.
I mean, give me 5 minutes, and I might have the one true answer for you.
Right.
The other thing,
can I throw a counterpoint at Neil then? Because you just said you don't like the story. Well, I've got to say that I'm kind of keen on that bit.
It's nonsense. That's nonsense. We're not having any of that around here.
Oh, you're a child. Oh, you're a child.
When I played a Mousetrap, and I was Bluey. Oh, Bluey, I loved Bluey. And he went round the board, he went forward twice. Oh, it was a great story. He's just playing a bloody game. Come on.
Because a lot of my games, we don't have any mapping. We don't use, I've got into Foundry recently, partly thanks to Steve, but most of ours was Theatre of the Mind.
Yeah.
And some of the best memories I have from RPGing is the characters.
Yeah.
Maybe the stories can come and go, but people play their characters really in depth. Even recently on the Rift game we played, which the rules sucked, but having Jim playing this naive dragon was absolutely hilarious.
Yeah, I think you're right about characters, definitely. But again, I guess I've never thought of it as story. Like that feels like a kind of a modernism to me. When I played back in the 80s, nobody ever mentioned story in the context of
yeah, sorry,
game.
I was only born in the 80s, by the way, for people listening, so I am the young one here.
Yeah.
Feel the burn.
Yeah, I have others, but let other people speak, and
That's okay.
we'll come
so
back.
I think from the story side of things, I mean, some of it will be sort of post-rationalized, so the dice will roll, and then you'll go. We've also, there's nothing more boring than listening to someone else talking about their RPGs, although we're doing that now. But we sort of make the story up afterwards. Well, why did that happen? Why did that roll happen? Whereas for some people, actually, it's more story first, and then the rules follow that. Others, it's the rules first, and then the story. So obviously, John's on, and as you say, it's more than just one thing. So is anyone else on the rules first side of it?
It's funny because we had a similar conversation with a few French-speaking friends about same age. So when we started, like at secondary school or at university, it was mostly escapism, being a barbarian or something and killing monsters, taking the loot. And then we had approximately everybody at the same time, the freeze we mentioned. And then we came back to gaming, and we would not play those games any longer, except those of us who remain children like Neil.
I like those games too.
No, I'm joking. But
you actually play in my games, so
I know I'm joking. No, but what I'm saying is that we all had the same experience, which is, you become a fan of a graphic novel, a series of comics, film, whatever. And you say, oh, this universe is so interesting, so great. I want to explore it, in more depth or width. Mm-hmm. But you can't, because usually, unless, it's Star Wars or they have 20 films, I don't know how many TV shows, but usually it's concentrated on a particular subset of the universe, on some heroes, and you don't see the rest of the universe. And so the only way to explore the rest of the universe is either writing fan fiction, which some people do, or you can play role-playing games in that universe. And as John was saying, in that case, it's more about the characters than the story itself. Because if it's only a story, then you would do fan fiction. This talking about stories versus rules, it's kind of artificial, because I think, it's mostly the characters rather than the stories.
But for you, then, it's about exploring a setting that is rich, and you feel it deserves more than what is available. And it's been collaborative, created with other people around a table, whatever. Okay, getcha. Dave, I'm going to come to you now, because you've had it's fair to say, challenging time over the last year. But for you, obviously, you come back to RPG, so it must offer you something specific.
Yes, not to sort of bring things down.
No, not at all. It's nothing down about it.
It's a triumph of the spirit. That's what I represent now.
Okay.
I think for me, particularly in the last year, I'd say one very sort of personal kind of aspect of role-playing games that sort of helped me out is it genuinely sort of kept me going in lots of ways. And one of those is, I'll come on to just a bit, the lonely fun aspect that you talked about, not necessarily dicking about with Foundry, but, rolling up characters that you'll never, ever use. Has always been quite a good way of sort of distracting yourself from various other bits and pieces that are going on. For me, I think it's an enormous creative outlet. I don't have a terrific amount of creativity in my job. Mm-hmm. I don't have any sort of great artistic bent. I don't have a potter's wheel in the garage. I've just got a couple of old bikes that are gathering dust. So for me, I think role-playing games is a very sort of creative outlet, which again is something I don't think sometimes we value enough. I think, as Gianni just said, if you were writing fan fiction, that would be a creative outlet. But as a couple of people have said, it's that sort of collaborative creativity that I really enjoy. And that brings me on to the last bit for my 3. So illness certainly kept me going, creativity, and then the last one is the social aspect now. Not just the collaborative element. We come out of the deep freeze, 5-6 years ago, something like that now.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And in that time, just got this enormous circle of people with whom we've sort of played games, socialized, got together, and a lot of that is down to Chris. He won't accept the praise, I'm sure. He brought people together, and in various ways has created lots and lots of little smaller communities and groups of people who are keeping that sort of flame going. So for me, I think the social aspect is a huge thing.
Yeah.
And the bit that is almost the antithesis of lonely fun. So
yeah,
I'm not overly interested in things like rules, story, anything else other than Merp, clearly, which is a fun game. So yeah, I think that's kind of it for me. Yeah.
No, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I think the creativity is that essentially it's when we talked about it before, it's like in the moment, isn't it? So you're creating it and you don't really know what's going to happen. You've got this uncertainty generator in terms of dice, and so it is that things would happen that you could never expect.
Gianni's point is that actually, as long as I've interpreted it correctly, you're getting the opportunity to live out your sort of involvement in either whatever it might be, the Lord of the Rings or Moorcock's universe or Fritz Leiber's universe, whatever. But the best example I can give you of that is recently a friend's son. He has some sort of learning issues, but we were talking about Lord of the Rings, and he just started reading Lord of the Rings. I just sort of said to him, what if you could be in Lord of the Rings, which character would you want to play? And it was sort of like, well, I'd be, I can't remember exactly who he said. I think it might have been Legolas, something like that. I said, well, now you see, I may have a game for you, and gave him the basic D&D set. That's it. He's off. And he's organised clubs at school, after school, and everything else. And for him, it's an even bigger step up because that brought him into a sort of an entirely different sort of area of his life, which was socialising, which he hadn't previously been particularly great at. So, there's a real opportunity, I think, through role-playing games to develop communities, to develop, groups, friendships, social skills, even.
Yeah, absolutely.
It doesn't necessarily apply to everybody within the community, social skills, but we'll get there.
It's a broad church. It's a broad church day.
I try my best, Dave. I try my best.
That's right.
Chris, let's come to you then. So obviously, I think as Dave says, you kicked it off for a lot of us in terms of with the Grognard Files, and sort of a lot of us sort of got back into the hobby through, and let's say it was magnified, accelerated, other adjectives might apply through that. You must spend more time doing this stuff than anybody, either role playing or role playing adjacent. What does it do? What do you get out of it? Why for you?
When you pose the question, Steve, I just didn't know the answer. And it does beg the question, doesn't it? Given that I spend so much time doing it, the answer doesn't come immediately. So it's made me think about it a lot. And I think it is to do, I know that when we came out of Deep Freeze, initially it was to make sure that we saw Eddie, our friend Eddie, who'd not been in touch with for a number of years. And then from that, it always goes back to the Beatles, doesn't it? And in our little group of friends, I'm the bit of the Paul McCartney person who tries to convene everybody and get them together. And I suppose that instinct just went wider and wider when we did the podcast. Just like find more people to play with. I mean, there's more people out there to play with. So that's what I went on the hunt for. And, we're here playing. So I think there's that social aspect definitely that I enjoy, and meeting new people and learning about new people. But when I listen to Dave and yourself, I mean, I'm probably closer to Dave in that all that lonely fun of doing stuff on Foundry is the stuff I hate doing. To me, that's a chore. I still do everything handwritten because I spend all day at a screen. So I don't want to spend more time at a screen. And I think when I think about the work I do, I've worked in customer services for 30 odd years, and it's like the myth of Sisyphus. Every day you climb to the top of the hill and the rock rolls down again. And the next day you have to start again. And I think the thing with role-playing games and producing podcasts, you're actually producing something that's finished and you can see and it exists. But for me, it exists more in the, how can I put this, the performance and getting the feedback of the performance when you're around the table or online. And you get that, you get that feeling that everybody's performing and being part of something that only exists in that moment, and then it's gone.
Yeah.
And it, as you said, Steve, it only exists in our memories, doesn't it? It's not like something that's tangible. It's just when it works really well and everybody's really energetic and behind it and really, it's magical like nothing else.
But only for those people round the table.
Yeah.
So like, I think it was Steve was saying on the last podcast that when you watch people playing, it's rubbish. You know, I mean, some people love actual play. And that's fine, but again, you're just watching other people having fun, and watching other people having fun is no fun for me, really. You know, it's just it's only when you're in it.
Same here.
Yeah.
Touching on what Dave said and also what Chris said, thing I love about role playing is the creativity and the performance. I mean, this won't come as a surprise to most of you who I've gamed with, but I really love kind of problem solving. So I always tend to look at a problem in an RPG, and I'll never kind of go for the direct route. I mean, you guys who game with me will know that I tend to be slightly out there in what I do, and that's the bit I love. As someone used to say on the A-Team, I love it when a band comes together. That for me is one thing that I really enjoy about role playing is the ability to come up with stuff on the fly and then, you know, see how it plays through.
It plays to that creativity, doesn't it, really? You're not really sure where it's going to go, but if everyone's on the same page, the craziest plan can become something incredible, you know, and all it requires is that one spark of somebody says, let's try this, and then suddenly you're off down a different route, aren't you?
So reflecting on what's been said so far, so how unique is role-playing as a hobby compared to other hobbies? I don't think to some extent we're that unique, because lots of hobbies involve maybe what you'd call the lonely fun phase, where you're going through the prep. Now you could be a football obsessive. You spend all week on a forum talking about the next match. You could be into ballroom dancing and you're into sewing sequins on your costume. And then there's the preparation phase, and then there's the actual event itself, doing the hobby. So that's very common for a lot of hobbies. I don't think that's unique. Role playing isn't that unique in that respect.
No.
I think creativity is a word which kind of zeroes down on it, and to sort of get to the root of that, I think you need to go back to maybe what got you into role playing in the first place and what you were into before. The elements you were attracted to that got you into role playing. We've covered this in some of the other podcasts you've done, Steve, and how we got into role playing. For me, it was Tolkien and fantasy generally. There's elements in role playing which are unique, and like, you know, a fascination with invented worlds. I think. So if you like that, you know, people like fiction. There's a subset of people who like science fiction, fantasy fiction. There's those invented spaces which we're attracted to. Seeing the maps of those places. I think if you asked me to zero down into sort of one entry point to this world, was a mate of mine in primary school. Or it wasn't my friend until this point. He brought the hardback Hobbit into primary school, and he was showing off, and he had this book, and I just walked up and watched that. Looked at the map, and something about the map of, you know, this map, the Lonely Mountain map and the Murtwood map, that just I don't know, kicked something in, and then, you know,
it's like a switch in your brain you've never been.
Exactly.
I think we've all had that experience, haven't we?
2 years later, we're playing D&D. Came out. It was all meant to be, I guess, because D&D came along, and that was a way. So what's the alchemy of D&D? It's being able to kind of share stuff like that amongst yourself, explore stuff like that in a social way. It's not just going off and reading about it on your own, which is fun itself. God knows we all love reading books and enjoying fiction, but being able to sort of creatively experience that with your friends. And then there's the game element, which is the unexpected element, which is where the dice produce a bit of chaos and the unexpected. and the fun of surprise. And that's the kind of alchemy. It's all those kind of creativity of experienced worlds or imagined worlds, the fun of those, the fascination with those, additional accoutrement of those, the maps, maybe it's language.
Game screens that go with it all the time.
Oh yeah. I like the bling as well. Yeah, I like all the bling. So it's all those elements plus.
It's interesting because I think, I think what you're saying is links to what Gianni was saying about having that sort of, we're not writing fan fiction. It's in the moment. It's something we do. But I think what TTRPGs offer is they offer a framework and a set of rules. So yes, you can do anything. You can do anything because it's about imagination, shared space and that sort of thing. But again, the rules are important in as much as they just provide a bit of a framework you can hang things on. It's almost like, okay, here are our rules of engagement as to how we're going to interact with this world. I think you were saying, Dave, that there's a greater and lesser level of comfort in approaching other people that you don't know. So for example, Chris I think is a natural networker. I think he that's what you do naturally. You bring people in, that's what you do. Whereas others of us, perhaps, I'm more of an introvert, perhaps, so I don't tend to do that. But through RPGs, when I first put that call out on Twitter, say, let's play RuneQuest, it's almost like a fuse. It was like a bit of this is a safe thing I can do where I can interact with other people. There are rules, I'm in control because I'm the GM and that sort of thing. And it meant that it was just a different way of starting to build those relationships as opposed to walking up to someone in a pub or a football match, which I would never, ever do. It just wouldn't be my sort of thing. Whereas I'll happily run role-playing games with people I've never met.
One of my big points has probably been touched on by pretty much everyone else, which is definitely the social aspect, but more the fact that it's a shared experience. One of my other points is like it's an escape, but you all having that sort of shared adventure together. And I work at Nerd Central. We've got an online sort of thread where people post their game updates, what happened in their sessions. But as people were talking earlier, there's nothing more boring than watch other people play a game. Yes, but I don't mind reading about what they got up to, for 5 minutes at lunchtime. And people post it and they are super happy about it. They love it. But there's almost like a Band of Brothers thing. No one says my character did this or my party did this. Everyone says I did this. We did this. We met in a tavern, went to the nearest cave and killed all the goblins and took their stuff. We defended the city against the supervillains. It becomes that sort of experience. And I think that for me is probably the best thing about it. You get to do that with people. Some people, nowadays, you can do it online with people you've never met before. And you can both have everyone's got a common language they can talk because nearly everybody will have done it before.
Yeah.
So it's we could all wax lyrical about the Red Box back in the 80s or RuneQuest or whatever, and so you get that sort of shared bond, which has only got perhaps even more prevalent because of the communities that have sprung up around the Gognard files.
Again, it comes back to that shared experience, really, in that sense of, I've said it before, I said it gives you a safe way to interact with people you would never have come across normally. So, for example, I think Dave, obviously you work in the sort of the environment that you work in, your sort of background, we would probably never have come across each other otherwise. But actually, we've got that shared fascination with MERP and crit tables. And, I know that I can ramble on to you guys about weariness in the One Ring. I know some people like Chris probably would go, but others like Neil will go, yes, the miserable rule in the One Ring is brilliant and it really captures things. And I can bollock on about that, and I know that it's actually Neil's going, yes, I'm interested in this conversation.
If it wasn't for MERP, I would have just looked down on you, Steve.
I know. Luckily, I've got it on the shelf, so I
actually listened to a different podcast, but someone was talking about getting into acting and talking about finding. You say, I found my people. I found my community. These were people that I could, this is what I wanted to do, and they wanted to do it, and we sort of could do it together, and it was great because up till that point, it'd always been like that. Well, I'm not really into this, and everybody's into that. I don't really like it, that sort of thing. So there's that aspect as well, especially now with. All of you lightweights coming out of the deep freeze, you can now get back into, where the rest of us have been, dabbling our toes in the warm water of the truth all the time.
Okay. I think that's what Steve said about most of us are introverts, and we wouldn't kind of walk up to someone in a pub and just start talking about about stuff. So, I mean, first GOG meet in 2016, I knew no one in Manchester. But going up to GOG meet, I knew I could go in a pub and there'd be half a dozen people there who I could talk to, who vaguely knew me, which was great. You know, I thought that was just walking up and meeting Dirk and Blythe, and it was brilliant. You know, just knowing that, you know, there were people there who weren't going to think I was a weirdo. Well, they might think I'm a weirdo, but they weren't going to think I was a weirdo for the normal reasons. It's
like, I think what Graham was saying, that there are lots of things about the role ttrpg experience that aren't unique. I mean, like prep, for example. And Andrew, I think you're saying that, you know, you could probably go to, I don't know, a Star Trek convention and you could talk and people go, yes, type 3 phases or whatever. Oh, you know, much better than type 3. And people would really get into the nuanced detail, that sort of thing. But I think there's something particular, again, this isn't about what tabletop role-playing games, how they're different to others. It's what do you get out of it? So it's acceptance. I think there's an element that, yes, as a community and everyone's on the same page, and I think often online communities aren't that accepting, whereas this one is. And I think if people aren't accepting, they get shown the door pretty quickly. You know, it's not acceptable to be like Chris says on the Discord, don't be a knob. I mean, I think that's pretty much a sort of a key tenet, really, of the whole thing. Rule 0.
Don't play with arseholes.
Yeah, don't be an arsehole.
No, that's a different rule, isn't it?
Yes,
that's like a medical kind of
rule
thing,
for life.
Maybe
it's a different community, isn't it? That one.
Yeah, there's a subset of us.
Okay.
The only other thing I was going to say, and it's a couple of people sort of touched on it. There was a little bit of this idea of shopping and collecting that informs the back.
I gestured to the shelf either side of me, all the crap I bought because of Chris over the last 6 years. I'm blaming you, Chris.
There is a little bit of that sort of obsessive nature, isn't there? Which, again, coming back to Graham's point, which I thought was extremely well made, is, you know, that does appear in other hobbies, football shirt collectors, for example, or program collectors. But there's a definite shaming element to shopping, and, you know, it's the sort of the mad cousin under the stairs is that you've got this slight mania for collecting bits. I've got to have everything, and that can be quite debilitating for the bank balance, anyway.
Yeah, I think that's more GMs than players, though, because see, my friends who are GMs, we are all crazy collectors, obviously, but we have some players who have been playing for a long time, but who are not GMs, and they're usually immune from this disease. They just play.
Never read the rules, just turn up and say, I can't remember what we did last time, and then you wait for Neil to tell you what he's got in his notes. But I buy a lot of, I buy stuff, but I buy it with the intent to play with it. That's the thing I like, because I like to, I mean, I'm very protective of my books, so I have the PDFs. I never touch the books, really. They don't come off, they get dusted and that's it. But I do get the material because I'm interested in how have different writers sort of tried to model the world, how they tried to model the One Ring through MERP or the Decipher game, or, you know, now the One Ring and that sort of thing. And I get a bit dissatisfied if it doesn't quite model it well. And again, I suppose that's one of the things I get out of tabletop role playing, is I get to fiddle about with rules and try different things out and make it up on the fly, that sort of stuff. I can see you nodding there, John.
Yeah, house ruling and mucking around with rules was definitely going to be one of my sort of likes of the system, because I think we touched on it first of all. A lot of us maybe came initially from wargaming, which is where I came from as well, and that for me bled into D&D. But I came in in 3.0, so I'm very young in D&D terms.
Yeah. But I think from the mechanics side, there's not many situations where you could come up with a plan. Right, we've got this big battle. This is a mechanic I'm going to make up, and then you get to use it almost. If you got a game that week, you can use it straight away, and you get feedback on. If everyone sits there going, Steve, this is crap, you go, oh, okay. But actually, if they like it or they don't throw things at you, then you go, oh, this becomes part of my GM armory or my armory as a player, or whatever. And I think it's almost like that instant feedback that I think you were talking about it, Chris, that you get to go with the ebb and flow, and it's that performance that you with other people.
It's that adage, isn't it? No plan survives contact with the enemy. No adventure survives contact with the players. You can plan all you like, but they are not going to play. They're like herding cats. They've got their own ideas because there's 5 or 6 of them, and you've just got to roll with it.
Well, this is where I would speak up in defence of
you next, Chris. Carry on, Graham.
Sorry, in defence of actual plays. you're saying no plan survives contact with the enemy, and if you're GM, if you're adversarial GM, you may consider the players the enemy. If you're an old-fashioned type of GM, so the point I'm making is that I think actual plays, some people seem to recoil from them. I think it's definitely worth listening. If there's an actual play out there of a scenario that you intend to run, it's definitely worth listening to that actual play, because the players might come up with something in there that you've not anticipated when you might not think they're going to come up with that plan when you run a scenario. So I don't listen to a huge amount of actual plays, but if it's something I intend to run, if there's one out there, I'll certainly give it a listen, just because.
Graham, what you're saying there is it's almost like that adds to the excitement, doesn't it? Because you don't know what's going to happen. Most of us as GMs and players, I'm sure, there's an adrenaline side of it as well. When you're running it and it's going and you're on the crest of that wave and it's all going in the right direction, there is nothing like it.
Yeah, just to pick up that point, Steve, I remember you did the Dying Earth game that I participated in at Grog Meet, and that was one of the greatest games that I played in. I still remember it. And I remember you saying that on your Fitbit, it went off the scale, didn't it? Your heart rate during that period when you were running it. So amazing.
It's something good for the waistline as well, RPGs. So there you go. If only.
Graham was saying about how trying to identify what was unique and talk about imaginary worlds. I think one of the things that's unique about it is the way that it leaks into other aspects of your life. So where you can partition things like supporting a football club or doing those kinds of hobbies, because it exists in your imagination, you find yourself reading things that are completely, seemingly irrelevant to gaming, but you kind of capture them within that world. So you listen to history and you start thinking about, well, how would that manifest in the world? You see the news and you start to try and interpret it through the hobby. And I do think that is a unique aspect of it, that it leaks into the imaginary, leaks into your everyday world.
I think the other point that Graham also made was about maps. And I think that's a big old gateway. How many people sit down with or has it got a map? First thing you do, look at the map. Is it an isometric? Oh, look, it's an isometric cavern of a map. This is going to be good. I think maps are a big gateway to, we're all sort of secret nerdy cartographers. I've got one actually here, which is the folklore and superstition map. And in there, it's just a map of the British Isles with all the various different folklores from villages and towns marked on it. And hours of endless fun reading a map.
That's where Liminal comes in, doesn't it?
I'll support Chris's statement about learning, because I had no knowledge of history, really. I skipped it at school. But I got into Ars Magica, and so I now look at history just to learn 13th century history, because it's straight there.
Actionable then, doesn't it? It's knowledge you can use. It's not like, oh, that's just going to go in a book. It's like, I can use this knowledge of the Mortimer Rebellion and the Barons' War. I can bring that through, and actually I can sit down with my friends, and we can game this. So it becomes
brilliant. So creeping into everyday life, because my third point is my wife games. So when we commute to work, it's often discussing games and stuff. So it's my final point was about Graham's, about the Let's Plays. I listen to a Let's Play Winter of Atom, because I've picked that up recently for the Fallout 2D20 system. I'm listening to it, but I'm listening not so much for the players, how they resolve the situations, but how the GM interprets the module, because I intend to run it. I am not a prep GM at all. I can run 4 hours of Vampire Masquerade with 2 bullet points, and I enjoy that. And I don't know time going.
Chris will play that, won't you, Chris?
So, I don't get that peak during it, like you were saying, Steve. It's usually afterwards, once the session's over and you're chilling, and it's just that good feeling of, wow, that went really nice. It just moved, and just love that feeling afterwards. Yeah,
you do get a buzz, don't you? Just quickly to pick up on what Chris was saying, I think it becomes all consuming, and it put me in mind of learn to play a musical instrument, because when I was learning to play a bass, I could not listen to music until I tried to work, okay, how does the bass line work on that? And I'd imagine if you're, learn to play guitar, it's the same sort of thing. So it's almost like actually that element comes to the forefront. And so almost you can't watch. So I can't watch. I find it really hard to read novels, okay, like science fiction fantasy novels, because I'm always thinking, well, that my party wouldn't do that. How would you make this a game? They're doing something stupid. It's like Alien Covenant is the worst ever RPG party ever. It's thinking no wonder it's TPK, because they just do stupid.
It does. It makes you critical of plot writers, especially the Hollywood and TV shows, because you as a player, we face these challenges all the times. We are challenged by these situations, and it's just like, you're just being idiots. Please make it better. You want the film to be challenging for those characters, and it's just like, they're just making bad decisions. They're not being challenged, they're just being idiots, because again, we practice this so much on a weekly, monthly basis.
None of this is real, though.
It is real. I think this is definitely real.
I was just going to comment on John's point and say, my wife plays as well. In fact, I actually met her when she asked me what a role-playing game was, and she's taken to it like a duck to her answer to the point. She now plays more than I do, and she's probably better known in the Grognard community than I am as well. So it's quite interesting. But yeah, it's nice to have a shared hobby like that. So the only downside is, of course, we've now got even more books in the house, because
is that a downside? That's definitely a plus.
I don't know. I mean, there's an entire shelf of vampire stuff we could get rid of.
Well, if you're looking to get rid of it, I've got somewhere it could go. I've got a shelf. Anyway, Neil,
takes the frilly shirts.
The frilly shirt, fine. I've got one of those from 30 years ago when I was a goth, but it's the books that are the problem.
It seems to me that everybody here is so much more thoughtful and analytical and insightful. Like to me, it's a game. And I love it. I am obsessed with it. There's no doubt about it. But I don't know. I just don't think I think about it the way other people are talking about it here. And so I get the buzz. I get what you're saying, Steve, about the buzz of GMing when, you're riding the crest of that wave. I love the lonely fun element of it as well. Reading stuff, reading rules, and so on. And I think the group fun side, the social side, is really important, like problem solving. But I just kind of get into a game, and I'm not thinking about, I'm not observing the world and thinking, how would I use this in a game? I don't know if I've ever done that. Maybe books, maybe reading books and stuff like that, but not the world's. But to me, the world's always been. It's not boring, of course. It's not, but that's why I do fantasy stuff. I don't want the real world intruding on my imagination. It's so. I think perhaps I have a simpler view of it. Maybe I don't know, but that's.
But it's immersive escapism, though, isn't it? I mean,
yeah.
It's like that time when you're watching a film and you're completely there, sort of really invest in it. But that's something that you're able to get, maybe not every time you play, but it's a common experience in tabletop where you're immersed, and you see people and they're all, yes, they're 5 or 6 different heads around a table, but they're all in the same space and they all are inhabiting that same world, which again you get that in storytelling. It's where everyone's contributing to the story, and it's iteratively growing as you go. But Neil, that's
what do you mean the story, Steve? There is no story. I thought we'd already established that.
There's dice, and that's it.
There's a game, and
what the hell's what's wrong with a bloody hit point? After all, come on. So right, well, we're coming up to the hour now. So and we've come to no conclusions, but that's been fine. I didn't expect to anyway, because I think it's just interesting that there's a real breadth of how we all come to things. And I think, just anyone got any sort of final thoughts, anything that they've been surprised by? I think there's a lot of commonalities we'd expect anyway, but any sort of final thoughts, Randy, before we close it?
Someone, I can't remember who it was, there's just somebody echoed the buzz you get. I think it was John, actually, the buzz you get after after a session that goes really well. There are probably other hobbies where you get that. I mean, if you play football and your football team wins and you're part of that team, there's a huge buzz in the dressing room afterwards. I don't get this sensation from, much as I love fantasy, much as I love science fiction, much as I love history, I can read those books, I can watch really interesting documentaries on those subjects, and I get a lot out of them intellectually, but I don't get that. There's a certain alchemy that goes on, and especially, and God knows we do a lot of this stuff online. Online is good, and it does happen online, but it still for me is the face-to-face experience. When you're in close proximity and a game session is going really, really well, and there's nothing, to my experience, I gave up competitive sports many years ago. So yeah, I'm not saying it can't happen in our hobbies.
But I think the thing is that as you talk about sports or other things or actors, whatever, not everybody can act. Okay.
Yeah.
To a sort of a level where they engage at this. Not everyone can play music or play football to that level. I don't think everybody, and not everybody, want to play RPGs to the same level. It is a particular skill, sort of something that you want to engage with, and I think that's where it's something we're, as a group, I think we're good at, in as much as we produce experiences that we enjoy and that others enjoy and that we can participate in. Some people just won't get it ever, and in the same way as I can never play football, crap. So I think it's almost, we've gravitated to something we've got a particular aptitude for, maybe.
Compared to most participatory hobby, performance hobbies, the entry level for RPGs is so low. I mean, you can pretty much turn up to an RPG never having played an RPG before. I mean, if you turn up to like a football team, you're expected to have a certain level of ability. Again, even amateur dramatics. None of us would claim to be good actors, or even bad actors, quite frankly, but we can.
I could be a bad actor. Yeah.
We can all sit down. We can all sit down around an RPG table and do a performance that's something that we can get a participatory buzz off at a really low entry point.
It's funny. I told my wife what the subject matter of this podcast would be, and it was like, it's what we get out of RPGs, and her answer on my behalf was, I think you all like doing funny voices. She's overheard many an RPG session, and I think maybe we all want to be actors secretly. I don't know. maybe we're all frustrated actors. Maybe that's the answer.
Maybe. If only we got paid the big money to do this.
That big time podcast money rolling in.
Big time Patreon rolling in right here. Zero. Thanks very much for your time. It's always great to chat about this sort of stuff, because I think we spend a lot of time on it. We don't really reflect on what we get out of it. It's just interest to hear the variety. So take it easy, everybody, and I'll speak to you soon. Thanks for listening to another exploration of my gaming vexes. If you've got any thoughts you'd like to add to what you've heard here, or a gaming vex of your own you'd like to offer up for discussion, you can get in touch with me on Blue Sky via @orlanth.bsky.social or via Discord as orlanth.vex. Until next time, may all of your games be free of vexatiousness and be excellent to each other always.